Good evening. Welcome to this special meeting of the Lompoc City Council. This is a budget priority setting workshop. This is, what day is it? Monday, the 27th. It is 6:30 p.m. Madam Clerk, could we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Vega,
Here.
Councilmember Starbuck,
Present.
Councilmember Osborne,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem James Mosby,
Present.
Mayor Bob Lingle.
Here. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Any staff presentations or announcements? Okay, then we'll go on to the main business and only business is council discussion. And we'll turn it over to our city manager, Patrick Weimiller.
Thank you, Mayor. Our goal tonight is to work through, this is a budget priority setting discussion. I make sure I emphasize the budget priority component of that because this is specifically geared toward doing our budget, and as we construct the budget that we staff are going to present to you for your consideration. It's to help us understand if we have any discretionary dollars whatsoever, to understand what your priority is, so that as we bring them to you, we can maybe cut a few steps out of having priced out and brought programs or items to you, to have you say, no, that's not really what we want. What we'd rather have is something different. It's hopefully to get out in front of issues like that, make sure we're on the same page of understanding any particular priorities you have. So my role and hope tonight is to facilitate the discussion amongst you of what you have as priorities, to try at times to get that from general statements to specifics, and also part and parcel of going through this process is to establish a renewed discussion on the what's currently the $2 million reserve for fiscal uncertainty, because that has to be placed in order of priority, just like these other discretionary selections of programs or processes that we might have. If that remains your number one priority, in other words, to make sure that we have that much set aside in cash for an emergency or rainy day, then we just want to establish that and make sure that we get that as a priority along, or wherever else it fits with other priorities, because ultimately it is about where does the next dollar go. So with that, ready to begin.
Councilman Starbuck.
Let's start with the $2 million.
Okay.
I didn't bring all of my paper tonight, Mr. Weimler, but we do have a resolution currently in place that says we will hold that as a rainy day. So we would have to rescind that resolution if we were to ever move into using the $2 million. So just to make the council aware that if you want to do it, there is another resolution that's going to have to be done to rescind the previous one.
Exactly so. That was set into place by council, albeit a different council than this council, but by the city council, and what the city council puts in place, the city council can continue to enforce and enact, or it can continue, or it can take another direction. It's just, I just want to make aware and not take for granted that everybody understands that in itself, including keeping in place, is a priority, is a budgetary priority decision in and of itself, along with anything else we might do.
So, Mr. Weimiller, I have a question concerning that. I think the best scenario of their rainy day fund was stated by former council member Will Schuyler, when he said that fund would be, for instance, if we had a complete failure of our wastewater treatment plant and we needed to provide portable toilets for every resident in the city of Lompoc. I mean, a scenario. I mean, probably not going to happen, but a scenario. He says, this is sort of, so if a catastrophic event happened and we did not have that $2 million, where would the money come from? In an event that we had to come up with that money for these 3,000, 4,000 toilets?
I imagine we'd be either tapping other current cash resources that we had or scrambling to borrow the money to replace that.
So it'd be similar to our households. I mean, we each have, for instance, I always say you should have a 3-month supply of.
I think in that scenario, the most likely thing that was going to happen is I'd quickly make a call up to Sacramento and plead for a declaration of an emergency and seek the appropriate funds that are going to help pay for something like that. Because that would certainly be that'd be on par and on level with things that easily make state OES funds available and perhaps federal as well, depending upon how far-reaching that was.
So I guess what you're saying is that in the event, if we choose as a council to rescind the prior resolution and not have this 2 million or whatever we decide on, we'd find some way of coming up with the money from someplace in the event of a major catastrophe like that, or something similar to that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you're forced to action, you either come up with it, or, and that's true on an individual level as well, you figure out what you're going to provide for yourself, and then follow through and work out details as you work in the situation and it unfolds.
Okay. Councilmember Starbuck.
Is our budget going to be that tight where we absolutely are going to count on having to go into that 2 million? Or is this just a contingency?
No, not necessarily at all. But what I'm saying, just to reiterate, is it in itself is a decision. In other words, we're definitely going to have a budget. I'm not saying that it's so tight and squeezed that we're going to need that 2 million. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is we might get to a point where we discover we have some discretionary dollars. And we might, and in doing that, there might be a question come up. You may list as a priority, for instance, you want to see potholes filled, or you want to see an extra police officer hired, or you want to add a piece of equipment for the fire service or something like that. Anyway, some specific request comes up. And we have to look at that. If I'm in a situation, as I'm putting together the budget, the staff's in that situation, and we're looking, wow, the only way we could afford that apparatus, or the only way I could afford to do that level of street work is to dip into the 2 million, then I need to know whether that's okay or not. I need to know what the priority is. And that's all it is. It's just a question of priority. Cash reserves are a great, fantastic idea. All I'm trying to find out is where that is relative to anything else that we might list up here.
Councilmember Mosby.
Have we been dipping into it currently?
Depends on your interpretation.
Okay, well, and relatively simple. Have we touched that $2 million at any time right now?
I'll let Mr. Wilkie respond to that then.
Well, I believe the interpretation would be what is the measurement date? If it's June 30th, which is our fiscal year end,
then
we'll probably have that 2 million set aside. What I'd like to point out is in previous budgets, at least 2 since 2000, there have been, one of the statements that was made earlier was that we either keep the 2 million as a reserve based on the resolution that we have on hand, or rescind it. That's an extreme, because in the 2 budgets that were adopted middle of the 2000s, the resolution provides for borrowing money from that with a expectation that it will be paid back. And we've had two budgets that have said that in the resolution for the budget adoption that said we will be utilizing some of those funds during the year and it will be repaid in this manner. So if the desire is to account for the funds all during the year and then make sure that it's safe and secure at the end of the fiscal year, then we could easily make a statement in the budget resolution that says, we understand we'll go below that 2 million during the year with the expectation and the desire to have it fully restored by the end of the year.
So let me ask my question a little bit closer, more refined. So on October 31st, 2016, had we dipped into the $2 million economic uncertainty money?
No.
So that $2 million has always been available for the past 6 months then?
Yes.
Okay, so we're in good shape then with that, and I think it's important to have that. It's not something that we want. Emergency money, if you wait till the end of the year, that's not what you wait for. The emergency money is just, or economic uncertainty money, as they call it, is set there for a reason because of economic uncertainty. And you have an ability to access this, correct? I mean, if there's a need to go forward into it.
Council action, yes.
Yes, through council action, right. So there already is a way. I mean, it's kind of like, it's interesting that we're discussing this when we've been so adamant about establishing reserve policies and all the enterprise funds, and then we're talking about maybe getting rid of a reserve policy on the general fund. It's
We're
seems a
not
little-
saying we'd be getting rid of a reserve
Right.
policy. The reserves are all the funds that are within what's the definition of the general fund, which is more than just Fund 10, because it's looking at all the things that act as if they're general funds. So we, at the end of 2015, 2017, 2016, we had a lot more, we had reserves that were around 15%. So
But the economic uncertainty resolution references directly to Fund 10, does it not? Or does it include all the other funds?
the resolution that talks about our reserves is in percentages of operation costs.
I'm talking about the economic uncertainty. Was it 1992, I think it was?
94, yeah.
94? Isn't that referencing Fund 10 specifically?
It's a component of the general fund that's set aside with $2 million in it. That's just one component of the reserves of the general fund.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it can't be considered a restricted reserve because under the guidelines of GASB, which define how we have to report things, a simple rainy day fund does not qualify as a restricted reserve.
Apparently, I haven't been clear enough in what I'm stating about the discussion of the reserve fund as a matter of priorities. And that's all I mean it as. I'm not questioning whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. And I've certainly heard you before and not ignoring that. So to the extent that you find it interesting, it's merely that I am stating it would be an incomplete discussion unless you affirmed the priority of that amidst any number of other financial priorities that we're going to be discussing tonight.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Well, I'd like to just suggest that we go ahead and leave the resolution in place, maintain our 2 million, and if the need arises, then we bring it to council at that time, rather than just to put it out there that we could do it.
It's certainly your choice to put that, to move that up front and make that decision now. What I was suggesting in my facilitation was to get into the discussion of all the priorities, set those, and then try to understand and set where the 2 million would be relative to those. But if you're absolutely sure that that is going to be your number one priority amongst all others, absolutely. You can proceed with that now.
Any other discussion on this? How do you feel?
My first question is 2 million still enough? So is that a range that's still healthy for us, or does it need to be increased in any way?
Yeah, and that's a question you all answer yourselves. And again, it comes at some sacrifice of what would otherwise be on a list. And I'm not saying that to speak against the concept of it. I'm in favor of having a reserve, but it needs to be understood in the context of priorities. And right now, I wouldn't be able to answer your question even if I sat up there with a vote, because it's to me, it's in the dark, because I don't know. We haven't discussed what the potential priorities are, so I wouldn't know where to put 2 million or 3 million or 5 million or 500,000 in juxtaposition to everything else that might be considered.
Councilmember Vega.
You know, in order to help me, you know,
with the
in my decision-making here, also, our budget priorities, do we always, and this is a question for everyone, do we always start with a blank piece of paper? Or do we have a list of the priorities of last time also, you know, that would help us look at a couple things?
Well, we have a list of priorities from a priority setting that was more of a strategic priority setting. Now, this is only my second time in a budget cycle since I've been here, and the first time that I'm coming to you with a budget priorities discussion focused on the budget. So this is our first, and so yeah, so far 1 for 1.
I'm just looking
I
for a
show
little
up
help
with a
there,
blank
Patrick,
slate.
that's all, yeah, so we could line it up.
Okay,
Mayor?
Councilor Starbuck. Yes.
May I address one of the questions that came up? Councilmember Osborne mentioned is 2 million enough. We have a policy that says the stated reserve target is 16.67%, which is 2 months. So that's the policy that has been set by this council for the target for reserves. So whether those reserves are bifurcated into categories, that's also something that council can do.
But Fund 10 is not the only fund for reserves. There are other funds.
We're only talking about the general fund, yeah. Each of the utilities have their own set standard for reserves.
Councilor Starbuck.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to include this 2 million as a budget priority. I mean, it's there. I would just like to set it to the side.
So do you want us to ask the question, give you a direct answer as to whether we want to continue with the resolution of the rainy day fund?
It's whichever way you'd like to go.
Okay, so
I'm just here to receive and try to facilitate the
Yeah, okay,
discussion.
I'm getting the feeling, I think we should probably continue. Within the back of our mind, I get the feeling that we could feel comfortable with some sort of a rainy day fund. Is that correct? Okay, so let's continue with this.
Sure.
And if we get down to the bottom where we end up $1.8 million short, then we talk about that. I mean, you know, I realize we're not going there
Yeah,
tonight.
and I don't think it's that we're ending up short. It's just that ultimately, we're not going to be able to do everything that's on our list. And that's why we're going to seek to ultimately get a little specific and to rank order them.
Okay,
And it's just a matter of where the cutoff line will be. And we won't even know tonight, even though we have a list and a priority, we won't know exactly tonight where that list is. It's so that things are in order so that when we go and we put together the budget and we start understanding, we're fine-tuning our revenue and our expense projections, that we can see where things stay and where it drops off. And so with that understanding, it'll just be a difference on where the line is on the list.
okay. So I guess the answer to that is, right now, we feel comfortable having a economic uncertainty fund.
Glad we could come to that agreement.
That was only 20 minutes. Okay.
So with that, if we could maybe make our way into, if there are specific areas that people like to state as a priority. And again, to the extent they're made as general statements, I'm probably going to be pressing you to be more specific about them. If you said, wow, our roads are in rougher shape than I'd like, and I'd start asking specifically about that. Rather than just saying public safety in general, I might point you toward a number of public safety programs. If you wanted that as a general topic, I could talk about some specific needs that are in that area. So
Actually, I'll go ahead and get us started then. And I've always had the two priorities that we as a council, we as a city, not only just a council, we as a city, are actually required to provide. So it's not even something we can even think about not having. We are required as a city to provide public safety and infrastructure to our citizens.
So one of the priorities I want to put down is public safety. And you say you want to get specific, so my specific points on public safety would be infrastructure for public safety, specifically the fire station and a remodel, a redo, and improved police facility. So those were the, and public safety, and what word am I looking for? Maintaining or decreasing the loss of personnel. So what word am I looking for?
Attrition.
Retention, thank you, okay.
Retention.
So specifically, when I talk about public safety, I'm talking about the infrastructure of public safety, the fire station, the police station, and retention of personnel. Those are the three specific areas of public safety that I'd like us to concentrate on. And then the second thing I mentioned that we are required to do is infrastructure. And this council and almost every single council for the past 20 years has been ignoring our sewer lines and water lines. Again, we are required as a city to provide this infrastructure. So specifically under infrastructure, I think I'd like to concentrate on both water and sewer lines, and also roads, and that includes the alleys in our infrastructure.
One of the things I asked Laura, as she's starting to take some notes here, is to separate out, for instance, things that are general fund issues and therefore coming from one funding stream and funding source or multiple funding sources, from the infrastructure, for instance, you're talking about, which will have to do with individual utility enterprise accounts. In other words, how we go to preserve one or the other is coming from different angles and different revenue sources.
Okay. Councilmember Starbuck. Oh, Councilmember Vega.
I'd like to reaffirm the public safety aspect of it. I think is real important, but I think just saying we need public safety, and which is a given, it'd be nice to have a plan that goes along with public safety as far as on the current with planning and building, to see what's currently on the books for and what our needs are specifically to also for us to grow. I mean, sustainability is an issue, so I think economic development needs to be part of that. Without the economic development aspect of it, with the building and planning department involved, we're just building to meet a need or to meet a call time, or I think we can actually lay it out in a way where the public can actually understand the needs and the wants and the direction that we're planning on going as far as the city. Are we going to go west? Is the Bailey Corridor one of these options out there? We've talked about the 40-acre industrial park, things that will actually help bring money into the city besides tickets and other infrastructure. I think the infrastructure with the pipes, the plumbing, the sewer, I think that goes along with the budgetary process with roads and streets and alleys, because it doesn't make sense to redo the streets and then the pipes blow up, or they need to be redug up. It seems like we should, infrastructure for me sounds like we should start from the bottom up on certain areas. And do we actually have already a layout that describes which areas of the city are in greater need also? So I think with the infrastructure, just to say in general, it's going to be hard to rebuild the whole city, but you guys may already have a plan, Patrick, that shows where the greatest need is as far as even with public safety.
Well, certainly we can show by map aging of pipes and also trouble areas, if you will, either areas that have saturated their capacity or that we are starting to have the first signs of potential failure.
I think for me, to know that, hey, public safety is a given and a want, but it'd be nice to know the growth pattern of the city and the direction that we're actually going in, actually that's on the books right now, that actually shows the greatest need. And I think that way we can justify what the costs are.
And we certainly, that's available through everything you've adopted and approved, you or your predecessors, through the general plan. And certainly, as we came forth before with a proposal for a fire station, we were seeking to site it, understanding growth along the Beatty corridor growth within that industrial park area, along with every other movement happening in our planning schedule. So duly noted that where the organic growth processes are going within the city are going to lay out where we invest going forward quite a bit.
Councilman Vega, or Councilman Starbuck.
Thank you. Let's go back to public safety. I know you're looking for specifics, and I'd like to throw out there that obviously building a fire station in a 2-year budget cycle is not something that's going to happen, but realistic goals for a budget cycle, I think narrowing it down here, Station 1 retrofit should probably be the top of our budget for this cycle. Second thing is the retention. I totally agree with the mayor on this one. Retention is going to be 2 things, the work environment and the pay. It basically is going to come down to that. So I think that if we were going to make budget priorities in public safety, I would like to throw out there Station 1's retrofit and then obviously the retention of public safety people.
Councilman Mosby.
You know, all these things are great and we can solve a lot of problems. We have this stuff called money. And I think what I've been studying here and the number one hole that we seem to have in our community is, of course, the lack of money, but the jobs housing imbalance that's out there. The fact that we are recognized as having 10,000 jobs short in our community. And the growth component that we really don't have. The Santa Barbara News Press recognized that we had 2 single-family housing permits pulled last year. Before that, I think it was like 31, and then it was 52, and then 54. But finding the cure for that, maybe it's a little bit more than the public safety aspect and stuff, but it's a way and a mechanism to get money into our community, something that hasn't been happening. In finding a cure to that, putting some money towards that to analyze it. We have our general fund is coming up next week, I believe, for us to ratify and approve and stuff, but we haven't been able to modify the movement that we need, I think, to cure this.
So I think you touched on what I was going to ask, and that is, so specifically from a budget priority standpoint, you're talking about hiring or setting aside money for consultants to help guide us toward how we cure that imbalance.
Yeah, currently, since about 1990, we've been losing 0.5% to 1% of the people who have jobs to commuting, which isn't sustainable. In 1990, we had 60% of the people who had jobs, had those jobs in town, they lived in town. Now we're down to 40%. And we can't just keep doing that and becoming an ultimate bedroom community in this movement. But I think we need to not just talk about it, but find the cure. I think that's a significant, which could bring some of the revenues back, which would help this whole long list of stuff that people want to put up as budgetary items.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what the
Right.
budget, where the budget played in that, and you
Exactly.
covered that. Appreciate it.
The other aspect is, as we've heard, the North 8th Street impaction and traffic influence that's on North 8th Street. I know a number of people are really concerned about H and Central intersection, and again, a general fund item. But along with that, in getting back, that's also a general plan item, is we used to have the McLaughlin Crossing. And I found an old traffic study from 1972. McLaughlin Crossing used to have 4,000 trips a day, as recognized in that report, crossing that. And it's an item that's no longer in our general plan, the low water bridge that used to be there. And I know it's been talked about for the recreational that's happening at River Bend soccer fields when you have 2,000 and 3,000 people down there. There's one way in and out. And spending a little bit of money, general fund money, to see if that's a feasible bridge to put back on, which could alleviate, if we took off 4,000 trips a day off of North 8th Street, it could help significantly. And granted, that's in the county, so we have to get our ducks in a row how we're going to get progressing that way, but maybe advancing some money that way for the North 8th Street improvements, and that being one of them. I know it's tip a lot of people's tongues is that it seems to be getting worse every year, and I know we had some plans, and there's going to be more coming through the budget, but so more specifically, putting some money toward to investigate whether we can go back with the old McLaughlin Crossing.
Okay.
Councilman Osborne.
To Councilmember Mosby and Vega's points about economic development, while we can't necessarily drive economic development ourselves by creating those jobs unless we're doing infrastructure and hiring to do those kinds of things, finding ways within the way the City Hall does business that are more economic and more efficient to help make sure that we are not holding up businesses is important. And I think to where it impacts the budget is maybe looking at being open on a Saturday once a month and being available to those that are commuters and are looking to explore opening a business who can't make it in on Monday through Friday, or potentially once a week having later hours available. Things like that, and how that impacts our budget and how we do business, so that we become a little more flexible in our availability to those in the community looking to do economic development themselves. So how do we do that? And then secondly, I know that with the new fee structures, there was an evaluation of how much time and who touches what and how long a permit takes to get through. I think adding a tracking system where, even if it's just done in basic Excel until the new system is up and running, where somebody comes in and they apply for a permit, who did it go to, how long did they have it, what was the time frame they held on to it and then turned it around, so that we can get more efficient at turning it around. So putting some sort of system in place that becomes very easy for everyone to see where it's at.
To clarify, we do have a system in place that would track when we receive, like a set of plans,
Okay.
when we turn it back, what markings or whatever we made.
Okay.
So we do have a current that tracks accountability, but I just didn't want to make it sound like there was no system. We do have a system.
I figured there was, but
Okay.
with the public not being aware of it, what I'd love
Right.
to do is see that turn into something more transparent, so that it's something that is accessible by, say, if a council member's approached about, it's taking me so long to get this done, why? It gives us the ability to sit down and look at it and say, well, it looks like the turnaround time's been great from the city, but X, Y, and Z didn't come back in from you as the customer in a complete manner. Or, oh, I see it got held up here, and part of that is an issue of we've got one building inspector and we would love to have two, but as a result, things are going so well that you're just in the pipeline, so we're going to get to you. So I'd like to see how that impacts us, so that we know that we're hiring for the right positions and adding to the budget for personnel, so that we can be more customer friendly and not hold up entities coming in by how long it takes us to get those required work done.
I'm not trying to argue the point, just widening the understanding here. And I don't have any problem with the idea of, for instance, lending council members the ability to go in, and we could, more than once we've shown, especially when someone suggests that we've been sitting on something for a while, and no, we haven't. We don't mind at all showing where we stand with things. Don't mind having you have access to that, but you mentioned transparency, and it's important to remember people pulling permits and the like, sometimes they don't necessarily want their process or their job to be publicly accessible by everybody. So we'd have to, if they want access to their project, we'd have to find some way to encode that.
That's the direction I was
Okay.
meaning, transparency between us and the customer coming through the system.
Sure.
So that they could get in real time some sort
Love
of.
those types of systems.
Exactly. Not something that was publicly transparent because of that privilege of information, but something that allowed them to check on it and see, oh, it's definitely being worked on and it's in the pipeline, but it's just the nature of the beast. And having some sort of reflection in that says it typically takes 2 to 3 weeks if everything's been prepared properly and turned in a timely manner, so that people get comfortable with the methodology, and where we can speed it up, we do.
Okay, Councilmember Starbuck and Mosby, if you'd indulge me just for a second, and Mr. Weimiller, what I wanted to do, and I meant to do it, I want to take a quick couple minutes for public comment, because that may stimulate some thoughts on our part too. So I'm going to open this up to public comment. I'd like you to be very brief and specific as to what you'd like us to discuss. I'm not going to set a timer, but remember, just brief and specific. You want us to talk about a go-kart track or something, I don't know, just be specific as what you want to talk about. So anyone from the public wants to come up and give us some ideas?
Nicholas Gonzalez, resident of Lompoc. Well, I'm kind of going to jump right on the coattails of Councilmember Osborne. I have very specifically in regard to economic development, the streamlining of rehab, renovation, and remodel permit process. And I've made a couple of bulletin points of why I think that's important. Housing is at a critical shortage. Expenses are going up the roof. We have a unique situation in Lompoc that over 50% of our housing stock is over 50 years old. We have to do something to bring that up, and we also have to address the housing crunch. But I'm giving that just for any member that wants to look articles regarding the housing shortage. And then I'll hand this out as well. But basically, on a very specific nature, this industry generates thousands of dollars of sales tax as material and supplies are purchased for these. Also, the state's projecting a significant increase in employment as a result of construction due to the lack of housing. And that's both in renovation, new construction, because the governor is making huge attempts right now to address the housing issue. That's more jobs, local jobs, not like some of our larger projects that end up bidding out and companies from Bakersfield, Las Vegas, and the like are coming. Local stuff stays local. Increased property tax rolls. Each time an individual goes in and renovates, rehabs, remodels an existing housing unit, the county assessor is then able to reassess that at a higher property tax rate. Doesn't stop there, though. Not only is that house now on a higher assessed value, each and every one of the neighbors become a comp for increased property tax assessment. When you start doing this across your entire town, you start to increase the entire tax base of the town. We need tax revenue. We need sales tax revenue. The other issue is by keeping housing from continuing to skyrocket and to managing housing better, what it does is it doesn't eat away at people's wage increases, so we have more disposable income. The disposable income is an important factor that we're missing. If we don't stop this increase of housing, we're gonna rob the city of potential disposable income, and on a money multiplier effect in the economy, that's disastrous. And lastly is the housing stock. We have an aged housing stock in this community. We need to upgrade it. Presently, I think it's more punitive than it is proactive. Punitive, what I mean is we're going out with increased code enforcement, inspections, and we're finding ways to penalize and take money from people. A streamlined process will do the opposite. It'll incentivize people to do this in a positive way that has all these impacts that I've just discussed.
Thank you, Nick. Anyone else from the public? Okay, we're going to close public comment and bring it back to the council, okay? Let's see, I think Councilmember Starbuck had his light on first.
Just a quick comment on the infrastructure. You know, as far as a council priority, I feel like we should probably just delete this. You know, we've got the computer, it's happening. Infrastructure and the enterprise funds is a given. Like you say, it is absolutely required that we get water to people, we get wastewater away from people. We have plans, we did a rate increase to go ahead and set aside money to do these. I mean, I think we ought to just leave it off the list. It's got to get done, and I'm sure that the people that run wastewater, water, electric, and everything else are fully capable of doing their job.
Councilmember Mosby, you had your light on before I... Anything? You have any comments? Okay, well, Mr. Weinmiller, comment on Councilmember Starbuck's comment. So does it suffice to say that we need to set aside some money, we need to make sure that we take care of our water lines, sewer lines?
First of all, certainly, if you want to have it on there, take it off. Again, I don't get the vote. That's all I'm doing is facilitating your priorities. As to me personally, though, what my view is I would certainly hope that we all do embrace and understand the importance, as Member Starbuck stated. There has been a history at times that we've had rates that have been through a 218 process, were approved, and yet when it came time for the annual approval by council, council did not approve the entire amounts. when you bring up the, when you short, if you will, the rate on an individual enterprise, like wastewater, let's say, when we're in a situation where we don't have any reserves, since you must, to operate your plants and to operate your system, you cannot come up short on your day-to-day operational expenses, then where the investments fall out when we don't carry through with the, for instance, with rates, it falls out at the infrastructure level. Because part of when we set rates, part of what the rate study does is anticipate the need for the replacement of aging infrastructure. But that is the place that ends up getting deferred or delayed. So I certainly agree with his statement that it's a natural and would have to be done. I would say it's still incumbent upon council to embrace that as a priority. If not here, this is lesser of an issue here, more important at the time that the rates are brought forward to you for ratification.
Okay, so I'm willing to agree that it doesn't have, we can take it off, but I don't want it just forgotten about. I want us to, that's why this is a priority workshop. I mean, you know, it is a priority for us. If we don't have it on a priority list, is it going to go by the wayside? Or will we continuously realize that and keep it in the forefront of realization that we can't continue to ignore these problems that we're having? So I'm looking for some advice from you.
Well, the one thing about including it is it certainly makes it easier when our staff brings forward later on this year the ratification of the next year's round of rates to say, you really already made this decision in your budget priority workshop, but we're bringing it here for you to formally affirm that. It might make it easier for all of us having had that discussion. Otherwise, we'll be repeating the words. So but either way, we can work out, we can get there. I trust.
Yeah, I'm just going to toss out that this was one of our priorities at the February 24, 2015. Wastewater will be my example. We gave wastewater every increase they needed. Wastewater's infrastructure, by far, is probably the worst infrastructure of any systems in the city. So in this 2-year period, we should have been moving on this. We've moved to do the computer here. Everybody knew we needed our finances and everything fixed. Well, we're borrowing money, which we understood and proved to do that. This should already be in the planning stages, what we're going to do with our infrastructure. It's been 2 years, you know, almost to the day here that we had planned this. So it's there.
Councilmember Osborne.
I think it needs to remain a priority first for the discussions when the rate increases are brought forward to discuss and approve and move forward, but also to make it a priority as to where it's economically beneficial for us to make those changes as soon as possible because it may be affecting where business is going in. Given some of the discussions being had at Planning Committee about some of the businesses looking to come in different areas, and some of the discussion being about certain size of pipes were only put in for certain and can't handle it anymore. So I'd love to see a priority done about where the pipelines need to be updated that have an economic impact. That should be a priority to address first so that we encourage the business to come in and encourage the ability to have those businesses rather than them being pushed out because we didn't plan appropriately for business to come into those areas.
I'll just real quickly interject. These plans are in place. What are the priority jobs that need to be done? There is a 5-year cohesive calendar for water, wastewater, so they don't go follow each other and stuff. But I'm not against taking it off. But just saying, we've done it for 2 years, and we should already be well in place with this.
Councilmember Mosby.
Don't we have an agreement with the state on sewer line replacement? Isn't there a 10-year contract with the state?
We do.
Yeah, so we have an agreement already locked in that we're supposed to be following already, so. But whether we're doing it or not, that's another story.
If I may,
Sure.
Tim Smith, Chair of the Utility Commission. The city has is under order in its waste discharge permit. There's another discharge order for the sewer system. That requires what's called an SSMP, a sanitary sewer maintenance plan. That does include by order that we will inspect and repair and replace as necessary damaged sewer lines in the city. And so that is outlined in there, and that is, in essence, it's a legal obligation that we have to do this. So.
I'd like to make a comment about some of the things that were brought up. The 5-year plans to implement the rates for water and wastewater were done to accomplish several different things. One was to stem the losses in the two utilities. That was the first priority, so we would be able to meet our debt covenants, which is the second priority. In water, we're doing okay in those categories. The third category was to establish reserves at 25% of operating costs. Water is probably pretty close to that, although in the plan, it wasn't expected to be done until the very last year. And then the last component is setting aside monies that are outside the debt requirements to set up a replacement and reserve program. For wastewater, the decision that was made by the council at that point in time was to extend the length of time that that reserve was to be set up to 10 years to keep the rates from being, I guess, to keep the rates lower than what they would have otherwise have been to establish reserve in 5 years. I think the way it was done was looking at the last 10 years of capital improvements that were done in the wastewater utility and use that as the proxy for what was needed for the next 10 years rather than looking at the needs of the utility going forward based on a 100-year replacement cycle. So the plan for wastewater was to get it so it was able to start doing that in 10 years, so in 2023. But there was never an expectation that there would be any kind of great expenditure of funds for capital improvements in the second, third, or fourth year of the program. We are making headway on the utility. It gained revenue and it reduced the amount that it was in a deficit position. It's been making money for the last 3 years, so it's just going to take some time to get there because we were just not able to raise rates enough over that time frame to get the revenues in place to do the stuff that is necessary. Because it's a 10-year plan, and Prop 218 only allows for setting rates for 5 years. We have to go into a second rate setting authority so we can go to that second step. So I would believe, my opinion is, leave this as a priority so that when we do that second set of 5-year rate increases for wastewater, we don't lose sight of that requirement that the Utility Commissioner Chair just mentioned about the SSMP. So.
Thank you. Boy, give him a microphone, he takes advantage of it, doesn't he?
Yeah, while I'm thinking about it. We also, we keep talking about rates, but there's another way to increase the revenues, especially in water and wastewater, and that is through the number of accounts. These facilities, if we recall, in our, a few years ago, we did an efficiency study on those two utilities, and they fared very well unless we were talking about metrics that concern the capacity, because the capacity is greatly underutilized in those two facilities. So the other way, which has already been discussed here this evening, is to basically find a way to increase the number of accounts.
And we've been using that particular understanding of our available capacity in our economic development outreach. Well, before we moved on with other topics, I was going to ask Kevin McCune to come up and just a little bit of information, additional information on McLaughlin crossing. I don't think it impacts necessarily where your prioritization is, but just want to make sure you have all the information.
Good evening, Kevin McCune, Public Works Director. McLaughlin Crossing was when it was being maintained, was a county road. It's actually outside the city limits, so the county would maintain that on a periodic basis. There was actually road right away that crossed the river there, and as Mr. Mosby, or Councilman Mosby said, it was a low water crossing. So it would get periodically washed out, and the county would come in and rebuild that. I'm told that the county has actually relinquished the road right away along that alignment, and I don't know if that's true. This is just verbally what they've said to me. So again, however the council wants to go on that, just realize that the jurisdiction, the permits and all that history and the maintenance of it was never a city activity, it was a county activity at the time, so.
Mr. McCune, while you're up there and about the McLaughlin Crossing, do you think this is something we could engage in discussion with the county, with SB-CAG, et cetera? It's been brought up on the dais before, and, you know, I mean,
I think the county would be looking for the city to fund the activity. I don't think they're interested in doing that anymore. So that would be their position, but, you know, if this is something
maybe
the city wants to pursue.
maybe the state would, because it would relieve a lot of, you know, use on their roads also.
Could be. So it would be a negotiation, let's put it that way, so. Yeah.
Councilmember Mosby, you had your light on.
I think Mr. Smith said what I said. There's more than one way than increasing revenues to these enterprises, both water and wastewater. We've been told by the utility director in the past that, you know, basically we make twice as much water with the same staff that's sitting there. And raising the rates isn't the only avenue. Wastewater facility, we have one that can take, I believe, about 40%, maybe 40,000 people more at a facility we have there. So there are other components of that to getting more revenues, which would help all the way around down the whole list of everything we're bringing up there.
Councilmember Vega.
Yeah, I'd like to concur with Councilman Starbuck and Councilman Osborne also as the two areas of economic development on the infrastructure that we should take a look at, and whether it's on the priority list or not, I think it should be there as a minor, not as stating because we leave it on there, we're an advocate for rate increases. I think the statement being that there's growth, other items that we should be looking at, I think that's the direction we probably should take. I think that would help the city grow, help the city make money, grow our tax base. That's the direction I'd like to see the city go in.
Councilmember Starbuck.
It kind of get us back on track here too, though. I would be one, you know, public safety on the February 2015, leaving it as a top priority, but like you say, you were looking for budgetary direction on that. I still think that going back onto, you know, the Station 1 retrofit and retention for those two would be what we would want as a council priority. You know, that way we can put something on paper and we can move from basic discussion to actual priorities here.
I have no problem with that, but I don't want to forget about new Station 2. You know, it's something, we talk about new homes. Where are these new homes going to be built? They're going to be built north of town.
Well, yeah, but a little banter here. We're going to have a capital improvement plan introduced to us sometime, I don't know when. A station that 8, 15, whatever it's going to cost us is definitely going to be a capital improvement. It's not going to be a budgetary item. Station 1 is a retrofit. We've been on the, you know, boots on the ground with this for a while, and something that could be in a budget cycle to do. So I'm trying to stay within the next 2 years and not into the 15-year capital improvement plan type of thing.
I think staying within the 2 years is exactly why we are where we are in Station 2. Because we
and how we are in Station 1.
Well, exactly right. So to say we're not going to be discussing a new Station 2 when we're talking about building new homes to the north of town where we need a new Station 2 up in that end of town, or we're going to be putting lives in jeopardy. I mean, you think, and people may think I'm being exaggerating it, but if we try to build, what is it, 400 or 500 homes up north of town, and we are not able to provide proper response times, we are actually putting lives in danger. So I'm not willing to give up discussion on a new fire station 2 on this budget cycle. Now, are we going to build it in these next 2 years? I'd hope so, but if we don't, we need to have some plan of start putting money aside for it. And that has to be a council priority, because we're going to have the same discussion in 2 years, in 4 years, in 6 years. We can't build a station in 2 years, so why put it on there?
Well,
Have to
once
have it
again,
on
these homes that we're talking about are not going to have the greatest benefit for Lompoc. We will get some property tax out of them. We will provide electric, we will provide solid waste, we will provide public safety, but are they going to help us in water, wastewater? No. These are all going to go to a different community service district, as evidenced by Summit View. I don't, if you want to put it on there, but I think personally, an accomplishable goal for a budget is more important to me than a long-term one. That's why we have a SIP, or a capital improvement plan.
I think we need both. I have no problem with putting some immediate priority on retrofit of Station 1, but in the same time, we have to be discussing new fire station 2. I'm willing, but I just don't want to forget about new fire station 2. Mr. Weinmiller, just help us with that discussion. I mean, where do you see it?
Well, one thing I would suggest, right now, we're still in this brainstorming session. I actually think it's going pretty well, thank you, to get ideas, and you're being pretty good about getting specificity going. And I'd suggest for right now, probably the best thing you can do is just continue on and see if you can highlight, if there's anything else you wanted to highlight. If not, we can get into moving those priorities. And I think maybe that's the best way I could offer to you, Mayor, that you might come to some resolution, is the council as a whole, even if they had, like you suggest, have both those pieces on there along with everything else, at least they can choose where they'd want that. If one's quite a bit, for retrofits, quite a bit higher priority than starting a savings plan for Council 2, or the other way around. It would show up in that once we get to actual priority setting. So you've been doing the brainstorming session here, and maybe if you want to continue on that, if you have anything else to brainstorm, we can, then we'll just circle back and take what we have and try to get an idea of its rank order of importance across the board.
Well, I guess the other thing I think we should discuss, even though it's not I talked about the necessities, the public safety and infrastructure, is parks. And being...
Well, could I interrupt real quick? If we're going to talk public safety, we ought to throw a police station in there then.
I already put that in there.
Well, we don't have it down as our...
I have it on, yes, I have it
Okay.
on there. So parks, and specifically with parks, if we want to talk long range, we could redo all the fields with artificial grass and that, but I think specifically for this budget cycle, I think, in my opinion, the biggest bang for the buck is doing something with our restrooms. We have a few that are respectable, but the majority of the restrooms are, let's see, I think it came out during the campaign season. They're deplorable. So I think I'd like to address at least the restrooms in our parks. Councilmember Starbuck.
Mr. Weinmiller, didn't you say that part of our capital improvement money, or the majority of it, was going to be used for the restroom improvements at the parks?
For the available funds for parks, things like yes. But
So
that was going to be our recommendation to staff's recommendation, was going to be that we felt the most compelling component was restrooms, and from there, things like a master plan for Ryan Park or other improvements. We've got some ADA enhancements we need to do at a couple of parks that we have where we're not in compliance.
will our CDBG money be enough to do all of what you have planned, or are you going to need to come out of general fund to accomplish these? Because what that'll do is, I have some other things for parks that I wanted to discuss, and I'll just throw them out so the council knows. I thought River Bend, we could possibly use our new field leveling device and go in and do the soccer fields. Ryan Park, same thing. And I put probably the top priority one for restrooms, and then Pioneer Park, I thought the lighting idea that was discussed before was, you know, these would be probably accomplishable goals, just dependent upon the amount of CDBG money that we have available.
We're certainly going to use CDBG and other funds, and Ms. Gallivan can speak to that.
So right now, we are doing the accessibility, the assessment on the restrooms, and that should be finished up in the next month, so we'll have an idea on the costs and the, of all of the restrooms that have been identified and redoing those. And in phase 2, we are already committed towards allocating in order to use the CDBG funds for phase 1. We have to commit to phase 2, which will go towards the actual installations and the purchases of them. I don't think the CDBG is going to cover all of them. It probably will cover up to maybe 2, I think is what, 1.5. So, but I think it was 2 restrooms. So we're going to need to augment basically the larger picture with some other types of funding.
Or take a little longer on the number of
True.
cycles that we need to get there, either one way or the other.
So basically, if we were going to use parks as a priority and the council wanted to do it, you would want us to come up with a list of what items we would like to see done in the parks, or would you like?
I would like it to the specific level of saying, for instance, is it restrooms? Is it kids' play area? Is it accessibility? Is it, like you said, the turf condition? That's the level of specificity that helps us understand where your priorities are, rather than generalizing parks in general.
Councilmember Vega.
Well, Dirk, why don't we?
Excuse me, Councilmember Mosby.
I give you a real specific one, an all-out assault on the vermin at River Bend soccer fields. The gophers, the squirrels, and get rid of that. And then use that fancy new machine. You got to get out there once you figure out how it's going to go to level that grass out there. I think it's doable. Bring in some volunteer programs, whatever it might be. I think by fixing and healing that piece of grass out there could do a lot. And I know you got, how much CDBG money coming in this next cycle? What are we looking at, 600 grand or something maybe? Which should give us like, I think 3 bathrooms, when I gather from what we're looking at the expense with the grant funding that we're trying to get, which would do, you're looking at JM and Thompson bathroom redos, I think already, right?
Right, and then there was, it may be a little more. We'll know for sure on the restrooms
I
by the
think
time the
Pioneer
assessments.
Park was needed. Isn't Pioneer the one that has, they just have an outhouse right now because the restrooms locked down, closed?
We'll have the results. I don't remember if
Okay.
Pioneer was the exact priority, but
Okay.
we looked at it, and that's roughly where you're talking, and I don't know that all of that will be readily available. And we estimate maybe 2 restrooms that we'd be able to do.
All right, and it might be something in the next 2-year cycle, of course, or next cycle after that to get them. I don't know how many bathrooms were you looking at redoing. Were you, is Beatty Park one as well? The photos I've gotten, the worst bathrooms were JM. I got some horrid photos when you had a big tournament there, and some, yeah, there were some pretty bad photos of that bathroom.
They looked at over a half dozen restrooms that they have on the feasibility study, so.
I think one we could really heal though well is it wouldn't be necessarily that much money to get out there and get the River Bend fields, get the gophers killed, get a volunteer program, whatever it might be.
That's exactly the nature of what this is about tonight. If that's a higher priority than the others, we might be able to do them all, but if one's a higher priority than yours, that's what we're looking to find out.
I think that probably week in, week out has probably as much or most foot traffic of any of the fields. Do we have any numbers out there, Mr. McCune, on who travels, which park is?
Also, I'll just add the Pioneer Park, I do think that was made a priority. You're right, it just recollected that.
Okay.
No numbers on how many people go into that park? No? I know not, some weekends there's 2,000 people there, and there's a lot of weekends after weekends after weekends. To River Bend, the soccer field's down there. Anyhow.
Councilman Vega, did you have your light on?
I'd like to reaffirm what Councilman Mosby's saying is about the specifics. Since we're going to be specific here, I think the turf on these most utilized parks for the kids as far as AYSO and anything else that promotes any kind of family sports activities, we should pinpoint those as being one of our priorities. I think Ryan Park is one of our premier parks. I think the turf needs to be taking a look at and see what we can do to that turf to make it look better. It's one of our economic boosters, I believe, when people come into town. You know, I'm not sure about the River Park area about that, but if it's used for sports at all, I don't believe it is. But I know for a fact that Ryan Park is one of the economic boosters for Lompoc. But I think anything that's utilized by the kids as far as soccer, baseball and softball right here, I think we should take a look at the turf conditions along with the restrooms. I think it does us no good to fix the restrooms and the fields are just a safety hazard.
Councilman Osborne.
I'll concur. The priorities for me regarding parks are always going to come down what are economic drivers, because those then drive the additional funds into general fund to take care of the parks that are utilized in the neighborhood. So River Bend is used quite a bit for the tournaments and for regular play, and so the idea that it's improved and playable more often, or the potential to expand the number of fields over there. And then Ryan Park is a priority because it does have major events that drive hotel stays and drives dining out and additional funds coming in. And that park could have so much more potential for more festivals and more events. So I think having a master plan for that so that we know where we can begin and where that might go and what kinds of grants become available for it, because we do have a master plan and can apply for those and look for public-private partnerships to move some of these things forward are key.
Thank you. Since we hadn't talked about the master plan tonight, I know we've talked about it before, and I think it is important to keep in mind that ultimately with Ryan Park, because it is, if you had to point to a park that was the biggest draw from outside the area, right, at least for right now, and the biggest economic driver and one of activities that helps fill in turn from drawing, helps put heads in beds and fills restaurants and gas stations. That definitely needs a master plan to it, particularly when you get to where you start looking at overhead views of the park. It becomes much more obvious than even seeing, the normal street level views that we see of the park, of how it can be laid out and better utilized. I think, though, that that's going to be the whole process. We can get master planning done sooner. The process of doing all the components is going to take quite a bit of time. I think there is value as long as we've got the top dresser now and going out and taking care of fields. We probably are going to have to address the turf, even though it's going to mean for Ryan Park it may be kind of short term, because there's going to be a time we come back out and are doing some rather wholesale reconfigurations and overhauls of that thing. It's just not, I can think of maybe one or two features at that park that are going to be okay and left undone. And just about every other aspect of it, lights and underground and turf and play areas and certainly parking structures and just the layout to maximize it as an event space, we really have to put on a different set of glasses in how we look at the park, and to just enhance its attendability too. How we redo parking is going to be pretty critical there as well.
And then, since we're talking about Ryan Park, even though it's not an economic, I don't think they're economic drivers right now, but let's not forget about the football fields over there, pretty bad shape, and also the tennis courts. Both areas, in general, probably a lower priority, but let's not forget about those as well.
I understand the need for the football field. We might want to come up with a different view of how we satisfy that football field need than right there is what I
yeah.
tell you.
Okay.
And the tennis courts, same thing. That may well be the best location in general in town to have tennis courts. That location on the site is not favorable at all because it splits up a portion
Agreed,
of the
agreed.
park that's otherwise available as a bigger piece. So we'd have to find a way to reconfigure that.
Okay. Let's start over again now.
You talked, let's see, you hit, you have hit the things, the big things I know that are close to your heart. Public safety and infrastructure, parks, and with some understanding of what things help to create economic drivers. If you want to pause there and transition to a sort of stacking priority list?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Mayor, if I might, I was just going to ask my colleagues if they have something I've missed that you want to cover. Chief, Mike, Kevin. I knew I could stare him down long enough.
I think that the chief and I share that retention is pretty important to both of us, so we're just happy to hear that discussion. I don't think there's anything for us to add, though.
I echo the police chief. I do appreciate the focus on the possible retrofit of Station 1. Unfortunately, that will fall under a capital.
Thanks.
You mentioned streets and alleys. I don't see streets and alleys on your list.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
What? Yeah. He just meant, he said we brought it up, it wasn't on the list, though.
Right. So again, as we proceed with this transition to the actual priorities, we're probably going to examine those things that are general fund or otherwise special fund, separate those from some of the issues that are enterprise. To that extent, the two that are on the right, we might want to. Yeah, well, it's just that one's general fund with these two, and then you've got enterprise fund. Well, yeah, this may be enterprise and general, kind of a mix. So we just flip-flop. Yeah, sorry to be a pain. So, I don't know how you want to proceed from here. If you all individually wanted to select something and say, hey, here's the thing that really is closest to my heart, and then have a discussion about where those 5 things sit, or whatever.
Councilmember Starbuck has his light on. What are you suggesting?
Well, I was going to bring up now, under the council priorities, and this wouldn't be a budgetary thing other than possibly, like you'd mentioned, consultants, but the housing needs is a huge issue. More homes, more dollars, more tax revenue, you know, more subscribers. I think if we were to just list housing needs dot incentives, and then that should allow you the leeway if you wanted to get into more specifics in the budget with something to do. But I think that it would be the beginning of a cure for several of our problems. So I would like to propose that as possibly our number one council priority would be the housing and, you know, the growth.
Well, I'm going to keep public safety, specifically the retention, as my number one. Councilmember Mosby? I'm sorry.
And if we had the housing and we had the more money, we'd have the retention. So I mean, it's, you know, it's a circle going on right there. And I know, and again, if we didn't have the public safety, we definitely aren't going to get the housing. But we're at that point right now that we really do need to get things going. I mean, and I'm not sure, because I've kind of asked, you know, hopefully that number isn't correct in the Santa Barbara News Press, but 2 single-family housing permits that they're advertising all last year. That's, again, that's just an economic indicator. Housing starts federally. That's one of the most important numbers that's out there. We basically have no growth, and we need that component there. We can't just do it by keep raising rates. We have to do it with a sustainable way, which is a sustainable housing growth, which also brings around jobs, because building the housing itself brings around jobs, which stimulates and people spend times at our local, et cetera, the whole multiplier that comes to effect.
Okay, so your number one would be housing starts.
And yes, at this time, yes.
Okay. Councilmember Vega?
I'd have to agree with the housing aspect of it, also with what Councilwoman Osborne mentioned as far as the expansion of the economic development department, as far as the city, as far as the hours of business, all in that same little bubble. And then I think second for me would probably be the retention of personnel on the public safety end. I think that's really important as far as that end.
Councilmember Osborne?
Yes, it's a circular effect. We desperately need to retain our public safety staff, or we aren't going to be a community that's attractive to build homes in. I think that the idea of housing starts comes down to what kind of incentives are we putting in place, not just in building houses, but incentives for businesses to relocate here. And so putting money aside to have either the in-house or the consultants to do the research and help solve these concepts that are obviously being done other places or maybe novel to our area are really important, because if we aren't addressing the best ways to solve that issue and put some tools in place as part of our budget and factor in those tax breaks or those incentives or those reduced rates, whatever they are, to drive business, housing starts, and then of course lead to the income coming in to the general fund to retain. You know, again, it's what ways can we help drive economic development from a government position, because we can't necessarily create jobs, but we can create a better environment for those jobs. So what can we do in our budget to allot for the personnel or the research to then accommodate those incentives or those tax breaks or those other things that will affect our budget, at the same time creating retention to keep the staff so that we are a community you want to build and live in. So that's kind of, I know it's not a priority and I know it's a circle, but it kind of all goes together for me.
Councilmember Vega?
I'm sorry, that was.
Okay, so I think you've seen our top 2 priorities. Top priority then would be the economic start, you know, stimulus for the economy.
So the first one, stimulus for business. The second one, stimulus for housing. Did I have that right?
Okay, and
Or
then,
was it the other way around?
I think it's housing was first, is what I understand. Is that consensus?
Could I just toss out, I really don't think that it's a number 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, I think what we're talking about here across the board is all important. If we can work better to do a business, and we work on housing, but in the meantime, we're not going to forget about public safety retention and these other items. I think what you're really looking for is just basically a list of the main things that we're interested in. You're gonna have to put it together. I mean,
Well, the reason why I was looking for a 1, 2, 3, 4 is if I get down to a point where I've got $1 left, I'm asking for your instruction of where you'd like to see that dollar applied. If you want me to make that decision, I will.
So what I think I've heard from the council, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if we're prioritizing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's housing starts 1.
slash business.
Well, he wants it prioritized, so it's housing starts 1 is what I'm hearing from you guys. Housing starts, business, or do you want it the other way around? Business, housing starts.
Is that an issue, Patrick, to put slash business, or is that turning that into two things?
They are two different approaches. You use two
Okay.
different
So what are we
types of
hearing?
consultants.
So what is it, housing starts or housing? Housing? Okay, housing 1, business 2, retention 3 is what it is. Public safety retention.
Okay. So, housing boost,
Housing boost, incentives. Stimulus.
stimulation, okay. Housing,
You want to just use the word incentives?
very good.
Housing incentives.
Housing incentives. We'll figure it out. Housing incentives. Business incentives. We don't need more income. Okay. So, and Ms. Galvan brings up a good point. The housing incentives we're going to be focusing on, by the way, there's a sea of housing incentives out there for low-income housing. The ones we're talking about developing are for market rate housing.
Correct.
Thank you. Business incentives. Number 3 is public safety retention.
Well, we don't have a problem.
Did we get that right?
Yeah, 1 and 2 was the jobs, housing, and balance. I mean, it comes together. You know, these are SB CAG numbers that I was giving about the 10,000 jobs
Right.
short. So I mean, both of those are in there. The incentive aspect gives. So yes.
Okay. Okay, so that's a good 1, 2, 3. If you could tear that one off and maybe just put it over there on that wall somewhere. Is that gonna be okay?
Choose a budget, right? Not hours of business. The number 2, you have hours of business? I don't think you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I looked at the wrong thing. Thank you. So basically.
And then I believe, in my opinion, number 4 would have to be the infrastructure for the fire station and the police facility, understanding that retrofit on 1 would be immediate, but we have to, in my opinion, we have to start putting aside or doing something with fire station 2, and then the police station the retrofit on that as well. I believe that should be at number 4. Councilmember Mosby?
You know, I learned something interesting the other day at one of my County Parks Commission meetings, and actually in some communities, recreation in parks is part of public safety budgets.
Of course it is, yeah.
And they feel that it's, you know, it's important. There was a study in Baltimore in parks that they had out there with just having the parks reduce crime as much as 75%. And I agree with you that we need to get these facilities built, but just saying that we need to get them built, it's more than just saying it. And we need to get other things in gear so that we have this other stuff called money so we can build these darn things. And we can do it right. And we're not really in that position to get forward with that. And I don't just want to just say that we're going to do it. I know Station 1 retrofit, I think the study's been out, 2.5 years, 2 years. It's been out quite a while.
What study is that, sir?
For the retrofit for Station 1?
The engineering analysis was done, and we base all of our grant requests on the engineering analysis.
And that was been done for a while, right? Correct?
Yeah, last budget it was funded.
So we need, you know, that without a doubt is a major priority to get that. To go and shotgun and say we'd like to have the whole moon, but I know that we can get down and get one. I think without Station 1, are you able to live without the retrofit at Station 1, or do we? So
we have a hazard issue with Station 1. It's been defined. I use the engineering. We do not have construction drawings. We have a ballpark estimate. Simply retrofitting Station 1, it's a little more than that because, and I know you guys don't like to hear this from me, particularly some folks in the audience, once we open the box, we open the code box. If I might, first of all, I think this is great. I have the utmost respect for you guys. In doing this, I get it. It is not easy. We really appreciate the attention to retention, because I will give you some information on April 4th that'll knock your socks off about what's gone on in the fire department. Knocked my socks off the other day. However, housing incentives and business incentives, there's a lag time. So we're all about wanting housing, believe me. We're all about wanting business. We support that. I talk about it all the time. We get that in here, and you're not able to serve it, then we've got some challenges. So yes, the retrofit of Station 1 from a safety perspective needs to be done. The second floor is not anchored to the walls, typical 1970s building. But when the engineers came in, it was kind of a startling analysis. Is it going to fall down today? No. The retrofit of Station 1 should be a priority. As you're looking at your other incentives, however, and I'm not going to go on the sales soapbox for Station 2, but as you look at those other priorities from a public safety perspective, and that's an interesting statistic that you just shared with us about Parks and Rec. At one time, I proposed siting a fire station with a park, but be that as it may, that was past life. But as you look at these incentives and want to build the houses, we literally have subdivisions already approved that they're just not building yet. We must be able to serve the increased demand, and it will come. It will come before the money. As soon as they start grading, as soon as they put sticks in the air, the increased demand happens. So, long answer, the engineering analysis that identified the need to seismically retrofit Station 1 was done in a previous budget. I have literally been applying for grants every cycle. We got very, very close last year. And actually, while we were sitting here, I sent a note to State OES asking when they were going to let us apply again.
Again, so realistically, let's talk about realistically what we can try to get this. And I think, as the chief mentioned there, that what's more than retrofit of Station 1, I think is really a priority. Period. I mean, the other items are great to talk about, but I really think
we agree.
let's keep doable.
Well, we agree. Okay, so the retrofit of 1 or the enlarged retrofit is fine. I want to go on record, I do not want us to forget about the need for Fire Station 2. So, and then the police facility, probably not the same priority as Fire Station 1, but it is a priority. So I think we put that as 4 and 5, or 1 police / 2, but I mean, Fire Station 1, 4, Police Station 5, is that okay with everyone?
I still think the police station, in seeing the capital improvement plan, maybe the next cycle and next go-around, we can look at that, but I don't, what are we talking about? 25 million bucks? I mean, and how, or what are we looking at?
I don't know, well, we don't.
But, you know, I saw the plans, the 3-story plans over here, but, you know, staying true and staying doable, we know that Station 1 and getting that done is something doable. That is something. You know, the capital improvement plan will bring the others together. We can see what we have when we approve on that. But in a priority, and I think it's definitely a priority, and it's not something just to put on another list, but it's something we've got to get done, is the revamping of 1.
What are the other 3? What do the other 3 say? Councilmember Starbuck? Councilmember Osborne?
I think the difficulty is balancing the 2-year budget term and what can be accomplished, and what along the long-term accomplishments we need to make can be done within the short term. So I think what I would look for staff to do is to make recommendations to us as to how to address some of these long-term goals through the short-term budget. Because if we don't put it into our short-term budget to address these long-term goals, we've seen historically council does not do anything and it keeps being passed on. So I hear the discussion and I hear the issues and I hear the dollar amounts and the potential dollar amounts, and I realize that you can't solve all of these long-term, very large capital improvement problems in a 2-year budget, but we have to, at least at some point during that budget, talk about how we're going to address it within those 2 years to make sure we're moving forward on it. So what I would love to see is part of our budget direction is to spend some time doing that and come back to us with recommendations within the short-term budget, how to address solving some of these or moving forward on some of these long-term goals. So that's where I'm looking at it, is not arguing over which is a priority, but because they're going to come back in the capital improvements and because they're such a large scale and because they're going to take such long-term, what's the best way to address accomplishing it and chipping away at it, and not just ignoring it and not doing something and only putting a long-term plan in, but never addressing it year by year. So.
I'm not sure what she said, but, you know.
You liked it?
Well, I don't know. So are you saying concentrate on Fire Station 1 and not just information on police station? Because we're looking at police and fire right now.
Right, and you're looking at infrastructure, and infrastructure is a problem for us across the community. So I get it that you're looking for one of these to become priority. I don't even think the retrofit of Fire Station 1, by the sounds of it, is actually something accomplishing in a 2-year budget cycle. So my concern is that's actually a priority that goes within the capital improvement plan, is that becomes where it becomes the issue, and is it done in 5 years versus 20 years like a potential new Fire Station 2 would be done. So my bigger concern is giving a directive to staff as to how do we address accomplishing long-term goals within our short-term budget, and that would be a priority for me, is how to address it, and where do we address it within those budget priorities.
And some of that, you're right, possibly it's not going to be accomplished in a 2-year cycle. But if it can't be, after getting information back, that means we set aside in this budget $1, $2, $3, $4 million, whatever we can, for these projects. But if we don't have it on this list, we're not going to be setting the money aside. Councilmember Vega.
I have to agree with Councilwoman Osborne. I think that a little direction on where the long-term goals will fit in would help us with our short-term goals. I have a feeling that if we put them up there on that high on the priority list, we're kind of skewing it a little bit. So the short-term goals are going to be they're not going to be attainable. So I think that we need to look at that. I agree with you.
I don't know if we gave you any direction on that.
Just from those comments, well, we're holding back waiting for consensus, whatever that is. So before we mark our next marks.
Mayor, I have
um,
one more question from Patrick, if I could, please.
Go ahead.
Patrick, maybe you could give us a little guidance here on as far as the Station 1 retrofit. It looks like the chief's doing everything he can to find a grant or other monies involved. Is that a budgetary item that we should have on there as far as a concern, or is there a real,
Yeah,
can you get the money? Can you get the money from other sources where it wouldn't have to be part of our budget?
the ideal situation and the chief's desire would be to find and get awarded the adequate grant funds where it's, quote, free money coming in from the outside. That can be a very competitive process, and so it's not, it's so dynamic. It's like if you need, at one time we talked about $4.5 million. I know the number's gone up. But let's say we needed $6 million to do the retrofit. If you got a 50% grant and got awarded $3 million, that is a pretty good, that's a solid triple you just hit. But that also means, wow, we're committing to do some, if we're gonna go with that, then we're committing to taking some steps to fill in the other $3 million in one way or the other. So it's difficult for us without knowing, exactly what the realities are or what we might come into. Obviously, things move up much higher and much more immediate the bigger the funding component is, and it lags back somewhat when we don't have that. So, a lot of it is, understanding that, well, that's why when we're asking you for priorities, I'm not necessarily, even though I'd love to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, doesn't mean we're ticking them off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It means we know where they sit, and if I were to look in a situation like that, then I could say, wow, either that is more important and wipes out some other things, or no, it's lesser, and we really need to get a lot more, because it's only like $1 million we'd be willing to make that $6 million project work. I don't know if you have a different way of characterizing the dynamic nature of the
Well, understand
grants.
I've tried 4 times for the grant. The last time we got the closest ever, and the comments we got back were almost comical. Understand these are reviewed in the Beltway. So the comments that came back were, well, why don't you just tear it down and rebuild it? It'll only cost you $1.5 million. We know from research that's not true. I must caution us, though, on grants. The news, right, wrong, real or not, if the amount of money that the administration is proposing to go to the military is real, the programs, the types of programs the money comes from are exactly what we're talking about. So I'm a little leery now of grants. I have no crystal ball, but I'm very, very skeptical. And yeah, the council did approve. You passed a resolution that I needed when we applied for the last grant, committing at that time to almost $1 million to help match.
Councilman Vega.
Again, Patrick, is there a mandate here that says that the retrofit has to be completed within a certain allotted amount of time?
Not that I'm aware of.
Kind of like open-ended, is that what's going on there, except that it is a safety hazard with
It's like we've
earthquake
already-
retrofit?
Yeah, the situation we're in is we're already on notice that we have a safety hazard situation. So we have an existing liability that has been bared to our attention. And so it's that kind of thing, that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so far, we've been riding the when, the WHEN when, with success, but we can't go indefinitely like that. So yeah, there's not a hard deadline, except that we recognize there's a situation there and we don't want to continue to expose people longer than we need to.
Thank you.
Councilman Osborne.
Thank you very much for that discussion. That has really helped change my mind and drive forward the discussion that if we're going to work hard at public safety retention and we have a building that is in that dire need, that if we don't make the retrofit priority, no matter how many people we retain. If there's damage to the building and you don't have a place to either work in or is unsafe for you to work in, there's no incentive to come to work. So that does change where I was listing it. So I personally think fire retrofit needs to be made a priority, at least to examine how quickly we can get to it, so.
Okay, so number 4, you have at least 3 and possibly 4 people saying that the 4th priority is retrofit of Fire Station 1. And I guess the police facility will be left undecided at this point. Councilmember Starbuck.
You know, to kind of make it easy, why couldn't we put it, the Station 2 and police station into a priority as far as a plan to save or put away? That way.
Well, you could do that. You could do that as number 5.
That's what I'm suggesting. I mean, we don't give fire priority over police or vice versa. I'm going to be candid. I don't think we're going to be able to put away a lot of money in this budget cycle for this. But if we combine them, we keep it on there, I think it would be a good 5, and it would keep all of it where you want to keep it up on the forefront.
Councilmember Mosby.
And I believe when we see a capital improvement plan, that's what the capital improvement plan does. So it's not on this, the budget priority list. I mean, that's the capital improvement plan that comes, and then we have the diagrams, how we're going to get to conclusion. I mean, we're looking at, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and that's when we go through the capital improvement plan, we'll be doing exactly what you're asking.
One possibility is for these things that are capital, and it might be a better way to respond from Councilmember Vega's previous question as well, because what you're bringing up, we do have 2 different areas. We've got our regular in-cycle budget, and you've got the CIP. We are going to be bringing the CIP to you. One possibility is anything that is more of a CIP nature, we'll go ahead and we'll bring it that time. We'll have our existing other budget priorities here that are more 2-year cycle oriented. And then we can meld if we say, well, we've got to take some money out of here to help start the savings program for your capital program, or that'll lead you to at least pay for the first step of design or whatever that is. If that's an approach you'd like to take, we can certainly do it. So it's a little more complex, but it's not beyond our capacity as a group to be able to handle that. So
That was what I was speaking to when I said, where in the 2-year budget can we address our long-terms such as CIPs? So yes, that is what I would like to see. And if we made that like priority number 5 so that it was incorporated into, instead of worrying about making retrofit fire station a priority, that would be great.
Well, I think we keep, for what I'm hearing is 4 remains retrofit Fire Station 1. 5 becomes setting money aside long range for police/fire, whether it's Fire Station 1 or Fire Station 2. That's what I'm hearing.
Councilman Starbuck, is that what you were looking to say?
It's basically, that's what it is. It would break them apart, you know, and I'm really just trying to draw some type of a cohesiveness with us up here. You know, I mean, we could continue to herd cats and, you know, fly fish and everything else here, but,
Hey, you want a group hug?
Huh?
Want a group hug?
No, not with you.
Okay, so, correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if you, no, get away from me. Okay, so, Councilmember Vega, did you want to make a comment on this?
No, I'm on the same page with you guys. I think it's excellent that we keep this in line as long as it's a long-term priority. We always said, hey, if you put $1 a month away, you'll have something. You know, it's not about the amount, it's about the making it happen. I think you're an advocate of that, right, Patrick? I mean, as far as there's 0 is 0, but
As far as making it happen in the capital improvement plan, there are a lot of different items in there, including parks, infrastructure. I mean, there's a broad spectrum of different areas.
It's a detailed
So-
list of projects in different areas. Yeah.
there would be a little bit of a hypocrisy if we didn't support it as a whole, even though it's a long-term goal. I think that along with growth, I don't know if there's a mandate or if even the chief can even say, hey, is there a point here where we can't service some of the growth that's on the books right now? You know, it's actually a great statement that he made that, hey, there would be a great challenge if some of the people move forward with the subdivisions or growth that was already on the books. I would tend to think that they could service what's on the books, but Only he knows.
I actually can make that statement. Right around 2020, 2021, the system starts to fail.
Okay.
If I could ask one more question here, Chief. When you have these subdivisions, yes, it's good for the medical calls and things like that. Actual structures, when they're new subdivisions, do you guys categorize those a little different because of they're brand new and they're up to code and all this stuff, or are they just basically medical calls so that you guys have your plan of action with?
Regardless whether it's new or old, our fire stats remain. I'll give you an example. We had a fire the other day in a sprinklered home. We still had to respond and do overhaul and stuff like that. The department right now is running true medical calls at about 68% a year of our 4,500 call volume. Just because a home is new doesn't mean the homeowner or the resident does not have a non-EMS related emergency, and there are all kinds of things they call us for. Agreeable, I will agree with you, a new home. We have a higher percentage of maintaining the fire to room and contents than an older home. We have a higher percentage of saving that home. However, the home still is not habitable once that happens, but for a much shorter period of time. So again, a quick response is extremely important. The way our insurance is rated, the way our ISO is rated is response times, total effective response force, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They don't care if the house is new or old. So yeah, the new homes, what kind of call volume are they going to bring to us? I will tell you right now, depending on the types of home you're building, the call volume will not be the impact, the daily impact will not be as high as it is, for an example, in the core where we have higher density. However, the risk will be there, and that in essence is what your fire department is. It's a risk insurance plan. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that's good. Thank you. Actually, we do support you, and I support the public safety aspect of it and the police department also. I just want to make sure that for the audience and the people listening, that they understand there is a limit to the speed of service and the amount of people we can cover. We've heard of we have the master plan, we have growth issues, we have things that we're looking at on Bailey Corridor, we're looking at the 40-acre industrial park. These are things that I think about, wondering, hey, are you guys able to cover all this with a minimal amount of overtime? Is there any overtime involved? Are people stressed out when they're doing their job? Again, this would be with retention also. So, thank you.
Okay, so I don't know if we've given you a clear definition of 5 yet, but I believe our clear definition of 5 is putting money aside for fire station, our fire station 2 and police station. Is that what I'm hearing from it? Okay. And just a little comment on that is that I don't know if we can save money fast enough to keep up with the increase in what it's going to cost us when we finally get around to it. But putting something aside is still better than not putting it aside. Okay, what's next on there? Well, no, let's talk about the, because it's still, did we do number 1 there, more transparent feel? Yes.
If I can comment on your
Sure, go
last, you just did something that's typical of governments. We're going to put money aside for something we have no idea how much it's going to cost. And it just seems like we jump, and I've said it before, a cart before the horse, before we see the capital improvement plan and we know what you're trying to save for.
But at least,
Just to put that out there.
and that's fine.
The other question that I have out here is that we can, I imagine at any time, if we see something, especially like after we read a capital improvement plan, we can move some of these things around.
Absolutely.
Bounce them around when things come back. So when we see that capital improvement book, I think, maybe number 5 should be the question mark. Look at capital improvement plan and come back with something along with this idea. so we know what we're looking forward to. So, just to say something there.
I think Patrick answered your question, and that's absolutely. We can change anything around. Okay, so what was the number one there? There was more transparent field.
Would you like to hear from the public at all again?
Sure. Hear from the public?
Nicholas Gonzalez, resident of Lompoc. On that line on item 5, I know as a resident and being in the real estate industry, I've often looked at impact fees. And I was often confused because we had this very large park impact fee, and it couldn't really be used for a lot of things because it can't be used for existing parks. It has to be for new operations. And our fire and police was like this big. I think that as part of this, we'd really need to take the time and reconsider the impact fees. I hate impact fees. I'm not going to lie to you, but it's a need. And we have to accept reality, and I think it's time to reconsider our impact fees if we're going to go on this path. It is a circular equation. We can't have one without the other. We need them both. So maybe it's time to reconsider the impact fees for future development. I exchanged words with our fire chief a second ago, and he indicated that it's maybe too late for some of the existing stuff on the books. But moving forward, we need to make impact fees reflect the priorities of public safety. And those, I think, need to be adjusted. We should be having probably, I value our parks, but I think that we need to be having a bigger impact fee for fire and police, and probably a lesser impact fee for other items.
I'll just toss out there real quick, the impact fees are going to be based on what the cost of the projects in the capital improvement plan are, plus population and many other things. So when we get the capital improvement plan, impact fees are always going to be in the back of the head.
And I've looked at impact fees in other communities, and ours don't match. Our priorities seem to be vastly different than other communities.
It was done in 2003, so.
Yeah, we do have a plan to comprehensively look at all impact fees, but glad he brought up as an example of fire. I won't be surprised. We'll have to wait and see how the numbers play out, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're collecting at about 1/10 of the rate of what the justifiable contributed cost of service is for a new home, what it takes to equip the apparatus, the personnel, and the station to provide fire service and emergency medical service to that home. I wouldn't be surprised that we're only collecting around 10% about what that impact is.
Okay, have we taken care of general fund other than parks right now on our list?
Well, yeah, there were some other things that we're talking about also, how we handle transactions at the business counter, doing some programming to make it more customer friendly, project tracking to be more accessible, as well as the parks stuff. There was discussion about hours of business, expanding hours of business for the counters.
Okay. Do we want to put that all as number 6? I guess you could pull it under the category, and I know you want it specific, but being
if you
customer friendly.
If you want to group, if it's going to help you, the project tracking, customer friendliness, hours of business, discussions, that's all that counter. I've got specificity and sub-points about what that means, if you want to have that together as a group. Likewise with the parks. The only question I have there, the turf, if you really want it sounds to me, Mr. Mosby, that for you, that was the most immediate component of that, is getting out the top dresser and making sure, or was it you, Mr. Starbuck? Who had the war on varmints?
I was vermin. I read war on vermin. He wanted, he mentioned top dresser.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so the war on vermin out there, and then following through with our top dresser to be able to do that.
Maybe we could do a bounty thing or
Which I
something.
probably would discuss separately from the restroom issues. So if you could give some idea of which of those
I think
is a higher
I'll
priority
agree
to
that the
you?
turf is probably more important, because that is, again, a public safety issue.
Okay,
Sitting on a rusty toilet seat, you may scratch your butt, but falling into a gopher hole, you're gonna break your ankle, so.
okay. So would you put that above the business counter issues or business counter issues?
I would use the Charter of Excellence and just leave the whole thing off.
Okay, but if I were gonna hold you to one or the other, like the one I have to do with the next dollar in the next hour,
Go with the parks because they are an economic driver, but look at ways to being more efficient with City Hall for clients.
Okay, so that would be
Parks,
then,
the grounds.
so it'd be parks and then the counter. Councilmember Vega?
I agree with Council.
Parks and
Councilman.
counter,
I think that's what Mr. Starbuck
Okay.
was saying.
I
'cause
think
the
that
other
sounds
ones-
good.
Okay.
Parks and then
parks
the
and counter, okay.
counter.
Okay. So, the Parks Church is next. Then the business counter, and then it'll be Parks restrooms,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
We know we've got master planning. So that's all.
So did we determine that within parks it was restrooms first? Is that what you said?
No,
Or
we're gonna
turf
we're gonna handle quality of turf first,
first? Okay.
above, and then go to business counter issues, then restrooms and parks.
I mean, you're going to be coming back to us, Teresa, with the CDBG and the amounts, and I'm sure you don't have very broad figures on that right now, so
So the restrooms, which were a priority previously, that plan that's in place, we're still moving forward on.
right, I mean,
It has not gone.
it's a budgetary thing, but it's not available yet, so.
Yeah, I guess that's where we have to, with some of the confusion lies, is that some projects take multiple budget cycles and we phase them with the understanding that commitment for the second and third phases is going to happen.
And I think that's the advantage of having the phased projects and knowing that those are already in line to come, and so the support is there to continue your phase with your restrooms. And so bringing that back and reminding council, whether it's the current or it's a new iteration in the third phase, is to remind us that this is completing a phase in of all the restrooms with the grant project, so that doesn't fall any lower, but doesn't, for this budget council, become necessarily the highest priority because you're already phasing in due to the grant cycles you're on and having put in that initial phase, realizing there's 2 and 3. Sorry. Okay.
Okay. Do you want to go into enterprise fund at all?
I think you got enough up there, don't you?
Well, the only other thing I just was asking Mr. McCune about exactly how we could translate the infrastructure needs that you've raised the issue about streets and alleys. And he has suggested, yeah, it would be a worthwhile investment to update our analysis of the condition of where we are as a starting point. So we'll concentrate on that as the starter to this. We'll certainly be having follow-up discussions on that.
Are you referring, Patrick, to the PCI index map of everything?
Yeah,
Is that-
right. And then from there, I think the only other component was McLaughlin Crossing. So we have some discussions to do with the county, get some clarity, and then get some rough pricing so we can make some informed decisions going beyond that. As to the infrastructure, I think it was pretty plain because the infrastructure accounts are so individualized. We haven't hit multiple stuff in each enterprise area, so I think we understand what your priorities are in each of those. So for me, I'm feeling pretty good about it, unless you have other things you wanted to raise.
You guys good?
Anything from my colleagues?
That's not a priority. Okay, even though we don't need to, anyone else from the public? Seeing Nick not rising, no. Okay, well, actually, we did have written communications?
Only what you received, and by the way, could I have a copy of what you did receive so I can put it on the record?
Oh. Okay.
Make copies and put them in our box that way. That'll good. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Oral communication? No. Council requests, comments? Okay, we are adjourned to a regular city council meeting on March 7th, 6:30 PM. Thank you very much. Good night.